So, whenever you're the head football coach for the Oklahoma Sooners, there's not too many places you can turn to get advice from someone that's in a position any higher than yours. But that's exactly what Brent Venables found not only this offseason, but this week at SEC Media Days, as it was revealed that Brent Venables turned to the GOAT of college football for some advice, and that same GOAT had some interesting things to say about Oklahoma's transition to the SEC that today we need to break it down, but before we can, as always, y'all know the drill. I have got to hear from you. Hop down to the comments, Y for yes, N for no, and let me know what you thought about Nick Saban's comments about the Oklahoma Sooners as they make this transition from the Big 12 to the SEC. Can't wait to hear from you. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe. Hit that bell notification as we are so close to 22,000 subscribers, and I'd love to have you a part of this unbelievable community. Plus, if you like the content, be sure to like and comment down below, as those interactions do seem small. They are massive to content creators such as myself, and both getting picked up and maintained by the YouTube algorithm. But having said all that, let's jump right into this. And let's start with the conversation that Brent Venables and the GOAT of college football, Nick Saban, had earlier in this offseason, where Brent Venables talked about him turning to Nick Saban to kind of get some advice in handling success, and Nick Saban telling him, hey, that's actually the hardest part of all of this. Because whenever you lose, if you are someone that learns from your missteps, and let's be honest, you're not going to become the head coach at Oklahoma and be successful if you don't learn from where you have gone wrong. That's part of the reasons why I'm so excited for Brent Venables, because he strikes me as a guy that learns from his mistakes, that is very meticulous in detail. And Nick Saban even backs some of this up. But if you are able to learn from your mistakes, even when you lose, you will have positive outcome in the long run. But whenever you're winning, it's a much easier mindset to get into that we don't need to fix anything. And some of the best coaches out there have fallen into this trap. It's human nature. Don't fix what's not broken. But at the same time, there still must be a continual evolution of your mindset to say, hey, we don't need to necessarily fix everything, but at the same time, we can't get complacent. We can't start resting. We must keep pushing forward. And it's a battle with human nature. And that's what makes this so interesting. That's what makes this so fascinating. To hear Nick Saban tell Brent Venables, it's not the losses that are the hardest, it's sustaining success that's the hardest thing, is actually, to me, really interesting. And this is something Brent Venables talked about at SEC Media Days, is that he didn't feel like this past season Oklahoma handled success as well as they could have. And kudos to Brent Venables. Right after he said that, he said, and look, it starts with me. And that's exactly what I mean. This is a guy who has the ability to self-reflect, and he took complete ownership of it. He took complete ownership of saying, hey, we had a huge win against Texas. We had everything in the palm of our hands, but after that game, we kind of slipped up. We didn't handle the rest of the season with the same ferocity that we had at Texas and before that game. That's on me. So he turns to Nick Saban, has some conversations with him, and as I alluded to in the intro, whenever you're the head coach at a blue blood institution, there's not too many people you can turn to that are like, okay, yeah, that guy as well as the head coach at a blue blood institution. But Nick Saban is kind of the exception, right? I mean, the guy is the GOAT of college football. So for Brent Venables, getting to talk to Nick Saban, getting to kind of pick his mind, get advice from him, that's as good as it gets. And listen, Brent Venables has been surrounded by incredible football minds his entire career, and we need to acknowledge that, from Dabo to Bob to Bill. I mean, he has had no shortage of incredible football minds helping mentor him, but if you get the opportunity to sit down and talk to Nick Saban, someone whose success wasn't just relegated to one portion of the histories of college football. He found success in the playoff era. He found success in the transfer portal era. He found success in the era that was before the playoffs. This is a guy whose ability to evolve was incredible. This is something Lane Kiffin talked about with Nick Saban, that separates Saban from everybody else, saying, hey, Saban's that old school coach, old school ball coach. He said, but the thing that's different about Saban is that he evolves. He's not scared to take risks. And a lot of these old school coaches, they're more scared to take the risks because they may be doing something that's working. So it makes complete sense to me that Brent Venables and Nick Saban would have this conversation, and Nick Saban may give advice to Brent Venables, and that Brent Venables may lean on Nick Saban for some advice here. Because this is a guy that, through all of his success, continued to evolve, continued to push it to get better and better and better. And I'm not saying he won a national championship every single year, but it sure felt like it, especially if you weren't an Alabama fan. Sure felt like they won it every single year. And that's because he continued to push the envelope. Even through all the success, he continued to try and adapt, to get better, to get the edge. So I love that Brent Venables had that conversation with Nick Saban. I love the voices Brent Venables has had around him. It's one of the reasons, one of the many reasons why I'm so high on Venables and what he will be able to do as a head coach. But now let's turn our attention to what Nick Saban said about Brent Venables this week and Oklahoma going to the SEC, where Saban had high praise for Brent Venables, saying that he thinks he's a really, really good coach with a really bright future. And I might be paraphrasing here, so please excuse me if I am. This isn't a direct quote. He stated that he's one of the best defensive minds in college football. And then Saban talked about the exact thing I have been presenting to all of you for quite some time. This is not the Oklahoma of yesteryear. This is an Oklahoma that has been building towards an SEC style of football, whether you want to believe it or not. I can get pushback. I can get told I'm wrong. I'm a big boy. I can take that. But I will still remain bullish on the fact that what Oklahoma has been building, what they have been doing under Brent Venables, is vastly different than what they were doing before. They're recruiting at a higher level. Their recruiting classes are more cohesive. Remember before, they would get good recruiting classes with Lincoln Riley, but it would be 15, 17, 18, 20 guys. Now they're taking full recruiting classes and hitting every need on the board. Oh, we need some offensive linemen? Cool, let's go grab these guys. Some wide receivers? Got it. Some running backs? Cool. Defensive tackles? Got it. Linebackers? You bet. Edge rushers? They'll be there. Secondary help? No problem. And they continue to get top-tier quarterbacks. Blue chip guys at the quarterback position, which was a question that genuinely I think a lot of people had whenever Lincoln left and Brent Venables came there. And I think if some Oklahoma fans are being honest, they'll admit, hey, that's even a question I had. I wasn't worried about us getting bad quarterbacks, but I was curious as to how a defensive guy would approach the quarterback recruiting, something that we've been best at. Well, we fast forward to now, and it's blue chip guy after blue chip guy and a five-star guy. So it's answering itself. The question is answering itself. But Nick Saban talked about how the way they've been building, getting more depth, especially on the defensive side of the ball, because he talked about, hey, with Lincoln Riley, they had the offensive firepower, but they didn't have the defense to get over the hump. Now they've been building towards a more balanced brand of football, and stop me if you have heard me talk about that on this channel. I say all the time, you don't have to be the number one defense in college football. In fact, statistically, since 2000, you don't even have to be top 10. But what you have to be is balanced. You cannot forego one side of the football in favor of the other. You must have balance. You must have a good offense and a good defense. And good is an understatement. You really need to be aiming for top 20 in order to get to the promised land. With the extended playoffs, I think that you definitely need to be top 20. Before, the data showed us that it was top 30. I think right now, with the extended playoffs, you want that top 20. If you can get top 15, you take it. If you can get top 10, you don't argue. But point remains, you just have to be a balanced team. And this is something I've talked about time and time and time and time again. Not necessarily towards Oklahoma, but towards college football in general. Nick Saban addressed that this is a team that has been building towards more balance. That has been getting that. That's been recruiting really well. That's been getting top-tier athletes. So Oklahoma's transition to the SEC, This is why I say it can be a weird take to digest, but they are better equipped for SEC play with a head coach in Brent Venables that had never been a head coach before than they were under Lincoln Riley, a coach that took them to the playoffs multiple times. But when we're talking about the week ins and the week outs of the SEC, you have to be able to sustain. And what's the best way to do that? Depth. What has Brent Venables built? Depth. Nick Saban sees it. I have talked about it. People close to the program have talked about it. And that's why I'm so excited to see what Oklahoma does year one in the SEC. Hop down to the comments. Let me know what you're thinking. That's it. See ya.